There we go.
Okay. Recording has started.
Okay, here we are. Oh,
Okay, I think we're good to go. All right, well, thank you everybody for coming here today. And sorry to disturb your Saturday, but it's a good day for everybody. And this is the traditional day to have our Pacific Division meeting. Let me see, I'm still admitting people as we talk here, but I also want to pull up my notes. So we have some stuff to go through, and then I want to take questions from all of you. So let's first, I would like to take a moment to acknowledge any silent keys over the last year. Anyone who's become a silent key, if you can just say their name and call sign, and we'll observe a moment of silence.
I'd like to recognize Lou NJ6H as a silent key.
Oh,
Also,
it
I'd
helps
like
if I turn like no audio.
I'd like to recognize my brother Paul KC50DW as a silent key.
We'd like to recognize Tom Ryan from here in the Indian Wells Valley. He was November 6th, November Papa Golf.
Also, Eric Ferguson, K6USJ, is a silent key this year, and I see there's been a couple into the chat entered there too.
I'd like to recall WB6BET Jim just passed away.
And I don't know her call sign, but Lerma Schwartz of Velocraft, Eric's wife, passed away also.
I'd like to add to that KG6 Yankee Uniform November Doyle.
I'd like to add George Cranen, KG6 YIR.
I'll add Bob Ringwald, K6YBV. Some of you know Bob has been around for years and years, was a famous Dixieland jazz musician in the Sacramento Valley area.
I would like to add John Siebold, KG6 Victor Kilo, long-term Ridgecrest resident and retired to the Thousand Oaks area.
Would John Wayne please come to the member services desk?
In the chat, Richard Napier, AI6ZQ, Doug Emerson, November 6th, November Fox, and Tom Diskin, N7TD.
There's a number of them this year. So many that I hate to give a list because I'll forget some. But two or three that come to mind quickly is Mark Zuckerberg, Mark Palins, and Steve DeLeo. All three come to mind among many others this year.
I'd like to recognize Tom Clemenson, K6PQ.
Is that it? All right, let's observe a moment of silence for all of those silent keys. Okay, thank you very much. I'd like to move on to introduce members of the ARRL the organization itself or here. First off, I'd like to, before we just dive into that though, I'd like to introduce our new Pacific Division Vice Director, Tony Marson, W7XM. You want to say something?
Sure. Good morning. Thank you. And thank you all. Trying to think what to say, but to say thank you for the opportunity, and looking forward to, joining the board and seeing what contributions I can make to the organization. And of course, if you guys have anything, feel free to contact me. I'm usually around and answer quite quickly if there's anything coming up. And obviously I can work with Director McIntyre, get some of those concerns or information or questions answered as best as I can. But thank you again for the opportunity, and hopefully definitely a learning experience that's coming towards me.
Yeah, like a fire hose.
Mhm.
All right. Let's see. Are there any other ARRL members of the board here? Just your name and call sign, please.
W6ROD. Hey. Yeah,
Okay.
good evening, or good morning, I should say, Kristen and the group. W6ROD, International Affairs Vice President.
Good morning, Rod. Thanks for being here. Anybody else?
Portable KH6 at the moment.
Ooh, nice. I want to be there. Is Bob RGG here? No, I guess not. He said he was going to be here, but maybe not. Maybe he'll pop in later. Okay. I know we have a number of section managers here. Why don't you all do the same? Tell us what your section is.
Mike Patterson, N6JGA, East Bay Section Manager.
John Litz, NZ6Q, San Joaquin Valley.
And John Bigley, N7UR, Nevada.
Anybody else out there?
James Armstrong, NB6W, ARRL Santa Clara Valley.
All right. Anyone else? Section managers. Okay, let's move on to field staff. If you are an appointed staff member for your section or for the division, please tell us your name, call sign, and your position.
Dan Sohn, WL7COO, San Joaquin Valley Section Emergency Coordinator.
Dennis Kidder, W6DQ, Emergency Coordinator for the Eastern Kern County ARES.
WD6CHC, Chuck Farnham, Assistant Section Manager, Nevada.
John Gerhardt, N6QX, DEC for Santa Cruz County.
Gary Watson, K6PDL, Assistant DEC, Santa Cruz County.
Somebody's got the repeater going.
N5ILN, District Emergency Coordinator, Monterey County.
Tim, Whiskey 6 Tango Sierra Tango, DEC, San Benito County.
Bob, WB6VYH, Sacramento Valley Coordinator, Technical Coordinator.
W1RO, Jim, Nevada Section Traffic Manager.
Van, NH7IT, Honolulu. I guess that's Pacific Section, Pacific Division, Assistant Section Manager.
Bill, KH6UU, DEC for Maui County.
Heather, AH7RF, DEC for South Oahu.
I'm Bob, N6 TCE. I am the emergency coordinator for San Joaquin County.
Heather Lee Takeuchi, N6HKT ADEC for San Benito County.
Mike, KN6FXR, the EC for Tulare County.
Is that everybody? Anybody else?
Greg, KG.
Are you going to do something, guys, or just?
I heard Greg out there. Greg, you want to say that again?
It's Greg, KG6SJT, Sacramento Valley Section SEC.
Great, thanks, Greg. Can I ask everybody who's not speaking to mute, please? Because we got a lot of background noise.
Chris, didn't we have Dennis with his hand up?
Yeah, I got that to hear. Dennis, W60Q, you have your hand up.
I apologize. I left it up. I should have taken it down.
No problem.
Yeah, there's my. There we
go. Okay, great. No problem. No problem. Okay, did we get everybody? Anybody I missed? Or you missed? No? Okay, cool. Next, let's see if we have some club presidents here. If you could give your name, call sign, and the club you represent.
Milt Hyams, I represent Marin Amateur Radio Society. I'm vice president of the board.
Bob Weiser, K6RMW. I am the president of the Fremont Peak Repeater Association.
Tim Collier, K7 JTC, Henderson, Nevada, president.
Yeah.
Robert Barron, KA5WSS, president of the Valley of the Moon Amateur Radio Club.
Bill, AB6MT, president of the Hamilton Wireless Association.
President of the Reading Veterans Amateur Radio Club. Whiskey 6 Victor Echo Tango.
Ron Luttringer, president QCWA, Mount Diablo chapter, Concord.
Good morning, Joel Baldwin, Alpha India 6 Delta Golf, president of North Hills Radio Club.
Mary, KD6 MKS, president of La Miranda Amateur Radio Club in the East Bay.
Jane, KB7 YUZ, president of the Nellis Radio Amateur Club in Las Vegas, Nevada.
And I can probably chime in. I'll do double duty. Secretary for the Sierra Nevada Amateur Radio Society here up in Reno, Nevada.
Jim, Kilo 6 Echo Sierra Tango, president of the Golden Empire Amateur Radio Society in Chico, California.
Anybody else?
Alan Thompson, I'm the Public Information Officer for the El Dorado County Amateur Radio Club in, well, Placerville, but El Dorado County.
That everybody? Going once, going twice. All right, anybody from any of the frequency coordination bodies?
Yeah, Tim Barrett, K6BIV, Director of Spectrum Management for NCDCC.
Mike Patterson, Treasurer of NARC, Northern Amateur Relay Council of California.
Okay, any more? Okay. Well, thank you, everybody. That's quite a list of people that we have here that, and these are all the people that help to support amateur radio. There are many, many more, of course, but these are the ones that are affiliated with ARRL and the ones that are working your clubs locally that have been chosen to be here this morning. If I were here in person, I'd have you all be giving them a hand because they work really hard to make amateur radio a better thing in the world right now. And I really appreciate all of your hard work and everybody on this call, your hard work for amateur radio. Just by showing up here this morning, you've helped make things better. I want to begin by telling you a little bit about what's going on in my world, and then I want to hear from all of you because part of this is feedback, because I want to know. We have a board meeting coming up for the ARRL, and I always take what you tell me very seriously and try to see how that fits in the boardroom when it's time for the board meeting. So let's start talking about the state of amateur radio right now. We have a lot of challenges in our hobby. Most acute is recruiting people to be part of our hobby so that it stays alive and vibrant. That's extremely important. It's a tough thing though, because we kind of don't know what to do because the world has changed around us. We live in this world that's very interconnected, where kids just carry the world in their cell phone and don't see the need to do all the fun things that we know are fun, but they haven't quite discovered that. And so there's a lot to think about here about what we're going to do to keep our hobby alive and vibrant. And I know it's those of you who attended the Pacificon and at the banquet where I spoke about this very topic know that I'm very passionate about this. And I really think that we need to figure out how our hobby moves forward. And it may not be the obvious things. It may be that we have to change some things that are uncomfortable to make changes around. Because if nothing else, ham radio is based on tradition. So we have to figure out how we can make changes and preserve the past while trying to move towards the future. It is not an easy task, but I'm sure you all feel it. You know, our numbers are steady, but our participation is small, and we need to change that somehow and make ourselves relevant. I also think too that you know, we have put a lot of stock, and I'm going to say something a little bit controversial. We've put a lot of stock in our value as emergency communicators, and that's extremely valuable work that we do. Don't get me wrong. However, I think that our value as perceived by government agencies is slowly but surely waning, and we have to cope with that too. We may know that our value is really important. I'm sure that we do. You know, each one of you who works in emergency services does a vital and important job, and you've seen how things have, you know, some really bad situations have been improved by your efforts. However, the powers that be may not see it that way. And that's something we can work on at one level, but we also have to prepare to be able to defend the use of our extraordinarily valuable spectrum, despite the fact that maybe the government doesn't support us the way we thought. So keep that in mind as you go forward. There's lots of areas of the hobby that are very healthy. I think that some of the work that the League is doing is very healthy for our hobby. You know, we have On the Air, which is a great new publication that has a much more wide appeal than QST. I like QST myself because I'm a nerd, but the On the Air has this appeal. It's kind of a glossy, more coffee table type magazine that I think appeals to a wider audience, and that's something we have to come to terms with, because I know all of you here probably just love all the gadgetry of radio, but we have to kind of make it a little bit slick too. so that people think it's really an interesting thing to try and be a part of. So tough words about that. I have my own theories about what might work. And if you came to Pacificon, you heard me talk about those. I'm not going to repeat that here, but if you have suggestions about what's going on and how we can, and what's going on with the hobby and how we can get participation up, get more active amateur radio operators. You know, we have a lot of licenses going out there, but how many of them are truly active? I would like to hear those, and you can email me anytime, or maybe we'll hear about them in the Q&A session as well. But keep that in mind as we go forward, that we need to bolster our hobby. We need to shore it up. It's not a crisis yet, but we better prepare now before it becomes one. I wanted to talk about our new CEO, who's in his second-ish year now, something like that. And David Minster, I don't know if you've talked to him personally. He's been making the rounds of some club meetings here and there, which has been great to see. And I think he's doing a great job under very tough circumstances. The league has gone through a couple of CEOs, as you all know. I'm not going to hide that fact. But I think we finally landed on someone who can get the job done. He's tough, and I kind of like that. He makes sure that stuff gets done. There's still a lot of things that fall through the cracks. Staffing is a real problem at headquarters. You know, imagine trying to hire in Connecticut for an organization that does ham radio. It's not an easy task to get people, especially higher level positions, in place that want to be there and want to do that job. And some of it can be done remote. So a lot of us have worked remote. We know what it's like. However, some positions require a significant amount of face time where you have to be in front of people and with people and go to meetings together. And so that makes it so some people have to move to Connecticut if they're going to take that particular job. And of course, paying competitive salaries is really tough, particularly when it comes to anything that touches computers. You know, we all know what the salaries are like around here certainly in the Bay Area. It's outrageous. And so trying to get the league to hire someone of that caliber is not easy because the budgets for hiring are not that big. So that's an important thing that David Minster is working on, but it's a tough job. If you know of people who are good at the jobs that are open, there's open job postings on the ARRL website. So if you know people that might be appropriate for those positions, let him know right away, or especially someone who's very passionate about ham radio. That would be much appreciated by him, I'm sure. But in general, lots of stuff going on at headquarters that I think is moving us in a positive direction. You may have noticed also that headquarters is open later, and that's for us here on the west side. So they extended the hours, a couple of extra hours, so that if you need to call into headquarters, you can get somebody on the phone. And for us, it used to close down really early in the afternoon at like 2 o'clock. But now things are open a couple of hours later, which is nice. So I'm optimistic. There's a lot of work left to do, but I'm generally optimistic about what's going on at headquarters. I wanted to generally mention that it seems like a lot of ham radio conventions and things are cranking back up post-COVID. You may have seen that, well, at least there's a few that I always go to that are starting to happen. Pacificon, of course, happened. Yuma Ham Fest has happened. It's looking like Dayton's going to happen, the Visalia DX convention. And of course, last but not least, the national convention, which is going to be Orlando Hamcation this year. And I will be there. I'm chairing the technical track. I'm trying to get at least 1 or 2 more speakers. If you know 1 or 2 technical speakers that are going to be there, I would love to know about that. Oh yeah, someone mentions in the chat that Quartz Fest is happening. So it's great. I know I'm going to be traveling a bunch, which is sometimes good and sometimes bad, but it'll be great to see everybody. We had our first in-person board meeting in July in a while, and that was really fantastic. You know, that it was striking to me how different it was to be in person versus being on Zoom. The amount of work that was done and the quality of the work that was done was much higher. Now, of course, we have Omicron, and who knows what else may happen between now and then, but fingers crossed, I'm very hopeful that I can see you all in person, which is really where I want to be. This particular meeting, of course, it's because of the geographic constraints. I do enjoy doing it on Zoom because I get to see everybody, but you know, for the ham convention and other conventions, it's just wonderful to be in person with everyone. So I hope that that continues. The major focus of my work with the board lately has been a thing called the IMC, which is the Investment Management Committee. So the ARRL has an endowment. That endowment has been managed very capably by the ARRL treasurer, Rick Neiswander, for a number of years now. I would think about 10. And he's done a really great job, but he's retiring at the end of this year, which is not far off. And so a committee was formed right during the board meeting in January to begin exploring an outside money manager. And that would be a money manager firm as opposed to an individual. So we've been working diligently, meeting almost weekly since February, which is unusual. Most you know, committee meetings at the ARRL are once a month, but this was weekly meetings, starting with a huge number of firms, getting lectures from luminaries in finance and money management. And we've got it narrowed down now to, I believe, 3 firms. And we need to narrow it further to 2 or 1 before we get to the board meeting this upcoming January. So I want you to know that the endowment's in good hands, or it's going to be in good hands. It's been in good hands so far, and it will continue to be. And we're taking good care of your money. We're trying our best to choose a really good firm that's going to do a really good job with managing the money through the good times and particularly the bad times. And if you've been watching the financial news, you know that things are a little iffy right now, particularly around inflation. So we're being really cautious and trying to make sure that those firms are qualified to handle those kinds, that amount of funds. And, I'm sorry?
Yeah, just Bill N6 VCT.
Okay. Yeah, we got a lot of noise here. I'm going to mute everybody. There. And if you need to speak, raise your hand or unmute yourself and say something, but there's just a lot of noise. Anyway, so they're really, I in particular have been grilling them on inflation and making sure that they know what they're going to be doing going forward with respect to inflation, because inflation is something we really have to worry about, trying to understand their strategies around that. So this is a real big deal for the league. We've never done it before. We're kind of stepping up in the world to have an outside money manager, but a lot of foundations do it. It's not an unusual path, but it's certainly one that the league has not done before. And I'm very confident that we're going to come up with a good solution here to take care of your money, because it's your money that all of you have contributed and also paid in your dues, et cetera. And it's really about making sure that the league continues long into the future for the next 100 years, to make sure that the money is there so that we can weather bad times and also do good things. So this is very important work. Another subject that I wanted to talk about is information technology at the league, computer stuff in general. It's been a kind of a sore spot. There's really hardly any resources right now to do anything at ARRL software-wise. Logbook of the World has a half a person who's a consultant. And that's, I think, an untenable situation. Don't know quite what to do about it. Probably going to talk to David Minster later today or tomorrow about this topic. It's again, this is a hiring problem. How do you get somebody to work in Newington and get paid what's normal wages around there and get paid what the ARRL can afford, quite frankly. So I'm not quite sure what the answers are there, but we have to figure out a solution going forward. I'd really personally like to see the league hire a staff, sort of a permanent staff, to take care of some software tasks, like 2 or 3 people. But I don't know if Mr. Minster is thinking along those lines or not. I think I need to talk with him about that. But it's a tough problem. People can work remote, but it needs to be an on-site manager. We don't have an IT director right now, and that would be that manager. So we need a very strong manager, especially if they're going to manage people working remote. Tough problem, but we'll get there. Let's talk about Spectrum. As you've seen, we lost some valuable spectrum recently, and that's very unfortunate. In the 3 gigahertz region, that was valuable spectrum to somebody. It was very valuable to us, but it got kind of put into a strange place where some of it is just speculative, for vehicle-to-vehicle communications that they don't even know if they're going to use yet. It's unfortunate that that's the way spectrum battles go sometimes, but it reinforces the idea that we all have to be vigilant about spectrum grabs. We have extremely valuable frequencies out there. A lot of people want them. This is the big battle going forward. And as somebody recently said, they were asking us on the investment management committee, what would you use this money for that you have? And the outgoing New England director, Fred Hopengarten, said, well, it could come to a situation where we have to suddenly spend, X million dollars to defend a big chunk of our spectrum that is someone's trying to get. So it's a big concern out there, and we hope we don't lose more spectrum like we've lost in the 3.5 area and around 5 gigahertz. There's kind of not coming back. We're still petitioning to try and get a secondary allocation for the 3 gigahertz chunk that we've lost. Don't know if we'll get that. At the moment, we can still kind of use it because they haven't taken it away explicitly yet, but they could at any moment. So the spectrum battle is the big battle that may come up and may consume some of that money that we have. And we have a wonderful attorney there, David Siddell. He's an excellent FCC attorney. He knows all the right people in DC to talk to in the FCC. And so he's just a great guy to have on the team. I'm really impressed with him. And he's a real ham too, which is the best part. You may be wondering about what's going on with all of the proposals we've had before the FCC. And I think nothing really has happened in the year since we had this meeting last year in December. And part of that has been COVID related. The FCC has been out of their offices. They're just sort of coming back now. The word we have is that, and it's not for lack of trying, we've been pushing them hard to take care of all of the pending requests that we have before them. And what they have said is, well, we're going to bundle this all up into a big omnibus NPRM and stick that out there and do that all at once. But still waiting. With them returning to their offices, perhaps this will accelerate things. I see Tim has his hands up, N6BIV.
Yeah, K6BIV. When you're talking to staff, make sure that they're aware. I just recently signed up for Logbook of the World, having no idea what I was doing, and the volunteers that I guess help moderate that have been wonderful, and they got me through it, and I'm QSLing via the borough for the first time in 45 years. So it's all because of the volunteers. So just make sure staff's aware that they got a great volunteer organization in Logbook of the World.
I'll let you know. I'm on the Logbook of the World committee, so I have a direct line to those guys. So I'll be sure to let them know. Let's see what else I want to talk about. Let's see, we talked about Spectrum. The license fee. I think I'm sure you were going to ask about it at some point. That's kind of a done deal. There's nothing we can do about it at this point that I'm aware of. We were lucky to have gotten the $15 discount that we got, and the FCC is kind of intransigent on that point. You know, that they say the Ray Bombs Act requires us to do this, and this is what we're going to do. And so unless there's some change through legislation, I don't think anything's going to change there, sadly. And we did, as a board, decide to fund young amateurs and pay that fee for them with certain qualifications. So I think that will help at least young amateurs that want to get licensed and don't have to pay that $35 fee. But it's better than a $50 fee. That's better than nothing. But yeah, I wish it was zero, like all of you, I'm sure. But we can't do anything about it right now that I'm aware of. Anyway, another fun thing that's going on is something that's coming out of the Programs and Services Committee, and that's called the Clean Signal Initiative. You might not have heard about this yet. It's very new. And some number of years ago, ARRL Lab did some work with the radio manufacturers to make sure that their receivers were performing adequately for modern contesting and DXing. And they've gotten tremendously better. They're really, really good now. Receiver technology is amazing, even compared to, say, 10 years ago. But unfortunately, transmitters have not come along for the ride. And a lot of transmitters have a lot of nonlinearities in them that cause problems of all kinds. You know, your favorite transistors that everybody's using these days, LDMOS, FETs, are highly nonlinear, as it turns out. And those nonlinearities cause all sorts of harmonic problems and things like that. We also have phase noise and all kinds of other things that get into transmitted signals, CW waveforms that are way suboptimal. Some radios have had default settings that have caused key clicks right out of the box. So what we're initiating, and this is a working group inside the Programs and Services Committee, and Mike Ritz, the Northwestern Division Director, is leading this effort, is the Clean Signal Initiative, which is a set of specifications for transmitters and transmitter cleanliness. And we haven't worked out all the details. You know, how does this relate to settings you might do, settings you might change? But we're trying to work out a spec such that the ARRL Lab could certify. And someone asks, I hope Rob Sherwood is involved. And yes, indeed he is. Rob Sherwood's on this subcommittee. And so is Ward Silver, myself, Carl Lutzel-Schwab, who's now the director of, I think, Midwest, maybe. Anyway, a lot of people are involved there trying to make this specification. Initially, there's a white paper that's going to be circulated at the board meeting upcoming. And we're hoping to create a certification program such that you can, your transmitter, oops, somebody's got like severe feedback there, such that your transmitter will be certified by the ARRL to comply with the Clean Signal Initiative, or the whatever we end up calling it. So we can put you can put a stamp on the back. All right, somebody, I think Paul there, you got a problem with your audio. That says this is a clean transmitter, and lots of details still to be worked out. You know, we don't know exactly how this is going to work. We might even push it through the IEEE. Ed Hare is on the committee as well, and he is, of course, deeply involved in IEEE, so he knows the process. So an IEEE spec might come out of this, which would be kind of interesting. So I think that's a very exciting development in you know, the kind of thinking that's going on at the league these days. So I think that'll be great. I wanted to take a moment to talk about emergency communications and the new standing committee that is emergency, and I can't even get the name right. I'm sorry. I'll have to look it up. It's I'll think about it. I'll get it in a minute. Anyway, the new standing committee, we have we used to have two standing committees. One was the programs and services. Paul, this is not working. Mute, please. Okay, I'm going to mute you. All right, hang on. So we had the programs and services committee and the administration and finance committee, and now we've added this third committee that's focused on emergency communications, and I will have it right here in a moment. Emergency communications and field services committee. So that committee is dedicated towards figuring out things like what is ARRL's role and how it should be structured going forward, what policies should be put in place, how we should deal with the government entities that are involved in those kinds of things. It's an area that I think the league has neglected to some degree. And I'm really happy to see some focus in that area, and hope that it will continue. And making a standing committee is a way to make it continue. Now, of course, committees don't solve all problems. They're only as good as the people and the work that they do, but it at least makes sure that that's a significant part of the thinking going forward. So I'm really happy about that. Couple of other things I wanted to talk about before I let you guys pepper me with questions. The Legislative Advocacy Committee, which is working on the replacement to the Amateur Radio Parity Act, is still active. I know you haven't heard much about that lately, but they have a draft bill and have been working with people in Washington. We have a lobbyist firm that is working with people in Washington, trying to figure out how we can insert something like this. Obviously, it's going to have to be inserted into some other pending legislation, but with the way Congress is right now, it's very complicated to try and get something in there that we can possibly get passed. So, and of course, we still have the other lobbies we have to deal with, like the HOA people and such. So that's still active. It'll become more active as the world reopens, because we can actually go to Washington and talk to the people we need to talk to. Prior to COVID, we were meeting in Washington. Former director, Jim Teamstra, was part of that, and they were going to Washington and meeting with the legislators and trying to get things patched up so that they felt happy with us, which they do generally, to be able to insert this legislation in some useful place. So that is not a stalled effort, it's just slowed down because of the state of the world, unfortunately. Another thing we've been thinking about is, I've heard a little talk about this recently, is forming a political action committee that might give us another mechanism to try and get something going in Washington. I don't know if that'll happen or not. I've certainly heard some talk about that, so we will see. But that might be one other way that we can have some influence in Washington and get stuff to happen. So I think that's all the stuff I had on my little list here, and you're probably bored to death by now. So why don't I open it up for you guys to ask questions? I'd ask that you keep yourself muted until you're talking, just to help everyone else out here, because sometimes all of the sound, just when you add it all together, it becomes noise. So just unmute yourself or raise your hand and I'll call on you. I think will probably be the best thing. So let's see, I have a hand up now and we'll start with John at 6QX.
Oh, thank you, Kristen. Who is the head of the Emergency Communications and Field Services Committee?
Right now, that's Bud Hipaa, W2RU. Unfortunately, Bud was not reelected, so I think that chair will be changing.
Okay, thanks.
Sure. Let's see, any more hands?
Kristen?
Yeah.
Hi, that's Bob A668. I had a question. I guess earlier this year, I happened to notice that we had an allocation between 219 megahertz and 220 megahertz. It was a secondary allocation for data. It was shared with the U.S. Coast Guard. I happened to notice at the beginning of the year. That's gone now. I'm just wondering, when did that go away? When did it? It's been something that's been gone for a while and I just missed it.
I haven't noticed this. So 219 and 222?
Yeah, 219 and 220. It was part of the settlement when the 220 band was kind of divvied up. We had 220 to 225 and as a secondary allocation.
Yeah.
And then we wound up getting 222 to 225 as a exclusive, and then we got this other little hunk down the bottom it was for data, and it was shared with the U.S. Coast Guard, and I know we had to get permission to use it. It was between 219 and 220, right below the other allocation. It was kind of a chip that they threw in, and it was like I said again. I noticed, if you looked at the frequency allocation charts, it was like this unique orange band that was in there. And suddenly I take a look and, beginning of this year and it's gone. So I'm just curious if you're aware of that.
I am not aware of that. Let me find out about this. And you saw it beginning of the year, right?
Yeah, beginning of the year. That's when I noticed it. It could have been gone before that.
Right. But at least that far back.
And it's still published on the band plans that you can do on the download in PDF, it looks like. So it is showing as just digital.
And that's on our band plan that we publish?
Yeah, on the PDF, but oddly enough, in the website itself, in the the textual area, I guess you could say, it doesn't mention it at all. So kind of interesting.
Yeah. All right. Well, that sounds like a question for our FCC attorney.
Yeah, I just one other comment I just wanted to make, Kristen. This is regarding the clean transmitter stuff that you talked about. Rob Sherwood has given talks at Dayton the last couple of years, NC0B, on this matter. It's going to be an interesting challenge because, as you made mention, LDMOS stuff just doesn't lend itself to being stable when biased to Class A, and you just can't do it. And as a result, intermodulation distortion products have just gone up, and there's really nothing you can do with using that type of technology. So they've got to figure out another way in terms of doing that if you're going to be using modes that require low IMD.
Yeah, exactly. And the idea isn't to necessarily offer an alternate solution from the league, but to say, if you're going to do this, you might have got to start thinking differently. In fact, there's a guy who offers replacement parts for TS930s and TS940s, and I have a TS930S, and he's now offering a final module that has LDMOS, and I thought, I'm not buying that. I'll stick with the originals, thank you. That stuff is not good.
Yeah, either that or go to CW.
Yeah, right. Even then, I mean, it'll exacerbate key clicks because it'll be essentially end tones, on the rise and fall.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Lots of hands up here. Dan Song, you're next.
Okay, well, I got too many questions actually, but the one that I think you can probably best address is, are you aware of whether Dave Minster has reached out to the actual head of training for CISA ICTAP to see how ARRL could, how they could help ARRL and vice versa?
I think that I saw an email where he said that he did. I mean, you can always try and call him. You know, he does take phone calls.
Okay, thanks. And
Yeah.
what's the status of Paul Gilbert's replacement selection?
So I'm pretty sure that they have several candidates, and they had like 3 very strong candidates, and they are narrowing it down at this point. I'll probably find out more at the board meeting.
We see those notes a week or 10 days after the meetings.
Yeah, you'll see whatever the board meeting minutes are. Yeah, some like a weekish to 10 days, something like
Thank
that.
you. And you did a wonderful job sharing what's going on within the league. And stuff that no matter how much we study the website, we probably wouldn't know about, and that you mentioned today. And I much appreciate all that.
Well, sure, thank you. Well, that's my job. So, you know, I think of myself as like your representative in Washington, except it happens to be Newington. And so I'm here to try to be that conduit between the kind of policy setting part of ARRL, as opposed to, you know, what's going on in the field. All right, thanks, Dan. Anything else before I move to the next person?
No, I'll hold my list because probably other people will ask, and there's no need for me to hog it. Thank you.
Okay. Next up is Bob, K6RMW.
Yeah, good morning, Kristen and the rest of the group. I'd like to share some real-time information with the group and with you as well to be taken back to Newington. Yesterday, I had a meeting with our local hospital management. I actually went out to visit my friend who was the chief engineer for the hospital, because there was rumor that the hospital might actually be closing, and I have 2 repeaters on the roof of the hospital, and I wanted to find out whether they were going to stay there or not. As it turns out, my chief engineer friend is now the CEO of the hospital, and we had a very interesting discussion about emergency support for hospitals and agencies such as medical facilities, government facilities, things of that nature, you know, the things we like to call served agencies. And he made a very interesting point to me, totally unsolicited. He mentioned the fact that their world right now is very much managed and leveraged by documentation and the passing of documents. First thing he told me was, oh, please do not remove your repeaters from our facility because they use them for emergency handheld communications inside the building. And he says, we do not want them to go away, and we will do everything we can to help you keep them here, which was kind of nice to hear. The point he was trying to make, however, was that if we as amateur radio operators show up at their door and say, we are here to help you with your communication support that you need, basically all we can provide to them right now is voice communications and packet or WinLink, which does not meet their real world needs right now. And this is what I would like to suggest for open thought by the amateur community and specifically headquarters as to how to get focus on this. You know, we talked about the 3 gigahertz band, you know, having issues where we're losing spectrum and stuff and everything. What he mentioned to me was the fact that they need somebody to be able to come in and have us, the hospital, hand them PDF files, handwritten pieces of paper, which obviously you can scan and turn into a PDF file, and be able to send them to some office, such as county medical center or to the state or whatever. And I would submit that amateur radio, which is supposed to be partly experimental and learn how to come up with new technology and stuff, is for whatever reason, either lack of focus or something else, not being able to meet the needs of these served agencies. And I would like to see if it can be addressed by amateur radio. How can we start as amateur radio operators creating a mesh network or some other technology that we can walk in and say, sure, give us your handwritten documents or your already prepared files, and we will send them down to point XYZ for you. That came straight from the CEO of this hospital, who has had amateur radio support him in the past, does not want to see it go away, and knows that it is a vital support of their specific operation and other facilities. So my point is, we need to come up to the current world level of being able to support the transmission, the adequate transmission of already prepared documents. And so with that, I'll back into the foreground here and let you guys carry on with it. But that was just as of yesterday. So I wanted to just get that out there, that the CEO of a hospital is looking for help. He's counting on help, but we aren't really in a place to provide the help he actually needs right now.
All right, thanks, Bob. Yeah, I totally agree that, well, data is the future. And just generally, that our value is dependent on our ability to carry data to a lot of different agencies. And we have put together, there actually is an ad hoc group that has put together a fairly large mesh network in Northern California. And it's mostly has been in the North Bay up until now, but I have talked to people. I talked to them over email, and then at Pacificon, I met with the folks that are working on this, and they're slowly creeping down into the South Bay. But of course, we have to have a, yeah, someone here says it's the Bay Area Mesh Network. Yes. And they are getting slowly larger and larger coverage areas so that this whole thing will be covered in a mesh. And of course, this won't be super fast. It'll be of a certain speed, because mesh itself has a certain losses. You know, you always pay for something. But the end result will be the ability to pass data like this. But I'll certainly take this information back to the other committee and mention this, because I thoroughly agree. Data is where it's out. Voice has its role for on the scene reports, but data is, the world is digital, as we all know. I'm just telling you stuff you already know. But thanks very much for that, Bob. Very good comment. Let's see, next, Tim, W6TST.
Right. One thing I was just going to comment with Bob was just saying that one of the things that holds us back, and that is we can't, anything that's got secured HIPAA type data, you know, sending it over ham radio frequencies unencrypted is a problem. And I don't know if there's anything that can be changed on that from the FCC side or not. That's not what I was going to comment on. I was going to comment on something else, but should I break there, or should I?
Well, let me just make a quick comment. That's it's a thorny issue, and it's not the first time I heard it.
Yeah.
And the kind of codes and ciphers thing, whether we can get exceptions for certain things, I don't know. I've talked about this a little bit with Dave Siddall, but I don't think we have an answer yet. But yeah, I recognize the problem for sure.
Yeah, it gets to be a thorny issue. But the thing I was going to comment on about the emergency communications and field services standing committee was I'm hoping we will be something more along the lines of guidance as opposed to more of a Newington's going to tell people on the West Coast what to do about emergency communications. The last time, things came through, I remember getting a document and suggested to review it as far as some things that the ARRL was going to suggest. And while I'm reading through this document, and on the second page, I get my QST issue and it's already published in QST. And I'm like, well, they really wanted my review, my input on that review if it's already made public, and there are just a lot of things in that. And I know some of the things that the ARRL has changed over time, but the trouble is, I think they weren't really listening to people in the field. I know Bob and I also had a fairly long discussion about this back at the time. And I'm hoping that they kind of would not make dictates from Newington, and B, be a little more open to taking input from the field.
Yeah, I think that's been a problem that you're not the first one to mention that one either. And there's I think forming the committee was a recognition that there's not enough input, and that these problems are deeper than just issuing a policy document. And there are some subcommittees that have spun off from that are taking input from the field. So I'm hoping that will work better. Let's see who ends up being the chair of that committee. Once that's settled, which should be at the January meeting, then I can get with that person and see what's going on about getting field-based feedback.
Cool.
But I will put it in my notes here. Let's see. Thanks, Tim. Appreciate all of those comments. Next up, Daryl, KI6LDM.
Hey, Kristen. I hope I'm readable.
Yeah.
Okay. So I've been involved with both the Cupertino Amateur Radio Emergency Services as well as the Santa Clara County. I'm also a level 4, what we call a level 4 credentialed mutual aid communicator, or a MAC. For hams, things have changed. That is, the world for emergency services and providing emergency services has actually changed. And one of the driving forces is money. That is, if there's a major event or catastrophe, an earthquake, or what have you, that requires served agencies to be involved, and the cities or the counties need to put out money for those. The question is, how do they get reimbursed, and how do they get reimbursed? And one of the major things is, as was mentioned before, is documentation and data. So one of the things that, if you're wanting to get into e-com, or maybe you already are, one of the things in order to make this work is for hams to get involved with, or to understand that you need to really take the ICS courses, the 100, 200 courses, so you actually understand the same language. And Santa Clara has really drilled into us that hams serve agencies for what the agencies need, not for what we need. And the documentation really helps because it explains why certain actions were taken, what the plans were, how the plans may have been modified, and then of course all the communication logs, so that when those things are audited, and this actually did happen, I think Alan Thompson might even know about this, but there was an event in a city where they didn't get all the funds because they couldn't document, why certain actions were taken from FEMA or whatever. So that's where all this is kind of being driven from. And so for those of us in Santa Clara who actually volunteer for the county and or for your own cities, that these things are drilled into us a lot, and we do drills twice a year, maybe sometimes more than that. But anyway, I just wanted to point that out, that the CEO of that hospital, the reason why he needs documents is because he's going to want to get reimbursed. And so those ICS forms, those 213s, those 309s, those 211s, all of those things really matter. Back to you, Kristen.
Thanks, Daryl. And yeah, on the topic of documentation as well, we also have our own documentation that we do, which originally started out well, not originally, but a couple of years ago, was this Aries Connect thing, which turned into a bit of a problem for various reasons that I'm sure some of you are aware of. And Aries Connect was terminated because it was costing a lot of money too. And now we have this kind of Form 4 thing that is probably inadequate in some way too. And this all leads back, and now you're getting my opinion, not necessarily what the league is saying, but this all leads back to a lack of software resources. So there's no way for the league to be able to put together a system that might properly replace Aries Connect because there are no software resources to do that. And you know, we're a technology organization. We rely on this kind of stuff, and I really think we need to invest in in-house resources, whether that's I don't know, whether that's an on-site team or a remote team, doesn't matter too much to me as long as it's managed properly. But the key is that we need software resources to be able to even gather the data that are necessary. And those data are really important. You know, just the Aries hours and all that stuff, that goes all the way up the chain to the agencies that we deal with at the national level. So that end of the documentation needs to be done correctly too. So sorry, I was up on my horse about that one. It's just a really important point. Okay, next up here is Bob AA6XE again.
How you doing, Kristen? Just a quick comment having to do with what's going on in terms of setting this type of stuff up and, you know, to be used in emergency situations, you know, is within the purview of 97.1 and what the FCC is doing. But there was like some issues having to do with WinLink when the ARRL was pushing that. They were starting to get comments from outside parties, you know, raising concerns about amateur radio setting up a utility. And it's something that they were also talking about encrypted data and, you know, how that would be administered by the FCC. So this is a real legal conundrum for them. And this is something that's, you know, going to have to be dealt with going forward. Staying as an emergency service, there probably won't be any problems. But again, it will draw, I mean, it was the WinLink thing was drawing ex parte comments to individual commissioners as to, you know, what exactly what was going on. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Bob. And whoops, we got a lot of feedback going. I was quite involved with the whole WinLink discussion with our council and performing experiments to show that WinLink was not encryption, or at least the PACTOR modems were not a form of encryption, or obscuration is the actual term, I think. So yeah, it's really important because some things just spin way out of control, and that was one of those things that spun way out of control, but we were on top of it. It took a little while to resolve that, but I think it's pretty much resolved now. And a lot of people are moving away from PACTOR to VARA and other technologies now. So a lot of it's become moot. But there was this assertion that it was creating intentional interference and all sorts of other crazy stuff, or national security risks. They're just insane comments. So it's, you know, as these things come up, we just deal with them, or we try our best anyway. Thanks, Bob. Let's see, next is Rachel, KK60AC.
Oh, good morning, Kristen, and the rest of the group. Rachel, KK60AC. I just wanted to add on more on the mesh discussion. You know, you spoke about getting youth involved, and, you know, the whole idea of mesh, TCP/IP, you talked about, you know, their world lives on their phone in their pocket. And that's exactly what the mesh can help provide. You know, you can just on your Raspberry Pi, you can install, you know, chat systems, you can install file sharing systems, things like OwnCloud. And so, you know, we can help provide that impetus to get more youth involved by getting more involved with things like mesh and getting TCP/IP going out there. And then, you know, the bigger discussion about TLS and SSL is, you know, I know you said that there's been discussions, but, you know, sort of the lack of direction is causing people to essentially ignore it on the mesh. There are a number of internet gateways hooked up to the mesh, which means that pretty much any site you go to on the internet is going to be using HTTPS. So there is, in fact, encryption going on most of these mesh networks, and people are just sort of looking the other way at this point because there hasn't been a lot of direction. And I don't know if folks have set up many applications on, as part of your mesh network, but sometimes it's more difficult to disable things like SSL and TLS and applications these days than it is to actually, enable it. So, this is a big issue that's, it's already here. It's not something that a group needs to be discussing. It's well past that stage, and we have to get that settled because we're violating this every single day. And the more that, of course, the mesh gets out there, the more that's going to happen. And, as far as emergency communications, we demoed some things to some of the local PDs out here and just showed them how easy it is to, if you had a mesh and a VoIP phone sitting on your desk, you can essentially pick up that phone, dial a few numbers and connect to the hospital and speak to them, even though all the phones are out. There's no cell phone service, there's no local phone service, but with a mesh out there, you can still do easy communications over things like VoIP phones. So they were really loving that whole technology, but and they view things like amateur radio, ham radio, as sometimes sort of antiquated. But when they see things like, just a regular desk phone and being able to use that, they understand that technology. So anyway, back to you, KK6DAC.
Great comments, Rachel. Thank you. And yeah, I'm aware of the fact that it's mostly ignored. But your comments reinforce the need, in my mind, for me to bring this up with someone at the board level. We do need to deal with this. This is not going to be something we can ignore. And like you say, I actually, my day job, I work on networking protocols, so I'm well aware of the issues and how it's almost impossible now with most platforms enforcing HTTPS and TLS to turn it off. So yeah, for sure. I hear you 100%. Okay, that's on my notes. Next we have Dan, K6DLC.
Good morning, Christian and the group. Just a couple of side notes. The one, I forgot what his name, but the Bob or Dan mentioned about documentation. Well, I'm responsible for the Palo Alto Veterans Administration Health System in Palo Alto, California. I'm also the trustee for the call letter too. Everything I've done is all documented. What I've done is I put on a share drive so that anybody within the government can access those files. Number two is that they're also printed, so there are binders in the radio room that are documented. But the bottom line is that the people I work with, the real employees, they don't have time to read the documentation. They're just kind of doing their own world, whatever job is required, which I don't blame them. But the thing about it, they just don't have time. They have no knowledge of that. Matter of fact, I even tried a couple other things. We even have an HS station there. They have, and unfortunately, the two people who are in the safety group are only technician class people. They're not general, which is a shame. We lost our extra class. He moved to Reno to the VA up there. Also, what I was going to say, regard to the mesh network, I agree with Rachel. I've got a PBX system here at my house on a Raspberry Pi. Matter of fact, I have a virtual machine PBX with the Raspberry Pi with the PBX. So it can be done on, it doesn't require any new hardware. Just use your existing hardware and create a virtual machine, which is kind of nice. Let's see what else is there. There's somebody who made a comment. I forgot it was. Oh, emergency service group. What is the emergency group? How are they going to interact with all these subdivisions like NERT, CERT, ARRL, whatever we're going to. There's so many organizations, but they're not talking to each other. How is ARRL going to handle that? That's going to be a big job. And there's another thing, WinLink. I totally agree with you. I've been running WinLink for God ever since it created WinLink 1.0. Matter of fact, Katrina, we had WinLink running down there. But I'm seeing a lot of these organizations are not running WinLink. They're running their own outposts or JNOS or something like that. How is ARRL going to get those people in the loop so that when an emergency does happen, we all can communicate with valuable resources and logistics and things like that? That's going to be one hell of a job. And that's pretty much what I've got. Thank you for letting me pop in here.
Well, thank you, Dan. Yeah, well, coordinating is a really tough job. Just trying to get the NTS system to work with the other ad hoc groups that are out there is a huge job. So I'll leave that to that committee to take care of. I know that's not a great answer from me, but their job is to try and wrangle this all into some framework where people can work together in the field. And I think the idea isn't necessarily to have it be, top-down command and control, but to have it in ham radio style, a bit more self-organizing. So I'll leave that to them and see what they come up with. But thank you a lot for your comments. Let's next go to Bob, N6TCE.
Let me unmute here. Yeah, okay. I've talked with my son, who is a database person. He works over in Sunnyvale for a major education group that runs a database. And what our thoughts, we've discussed it back and forth, and he's kind of planned it out on maybe on an envelope a little bit, is a bottom-up database where each EC or AEC gets a database that he can install in his computer, and it will generate the reports upwards to the section EC, and he can use the same database to generate his reports to send them to Newington rather than a centralized reporting system. And it's a buy-in. Everybody's buying in on it, and something along that line rather than Newington having it and organizing it and running it from the top down. Because it is a field service thing that it has to be managed in the field. And that's about it.
Okay, well, I hope you're working with somebody in headquarters so that they're aware of this, because ultimately a lot of the data needs to be accumulated at headquarters. So, have you talked to anybody at headquarters about this?
Nope, I'm building it for my own use, with my own organization here, and if it pass it out as a freeware.
Okay, well, just in the interest of everybody benefiting, it might be worth having a conversation. You might start with, say, Steve Ewald and see where it goes and see if it's something that they can make use of.
Okay, I can do that.
Yeah, that'd be great. Appreciate it, Bob. Thanks a bunch. Next up, Dan.
Okay, well, given the supposition that you work for us, I work for Bob and the other ECs in the section. And this issue that Bob was talking about has been laid out as many times and in as many ways as possible, not just by myself, but by at least two of the other three SECs that are on that working group they initiated way back when. So that information is getting there. Feedback about it is basically nil. And I'm going to stop with that because there's a bunch of other good stuff that came up. I want to point out that concerns about Hipaa in emergency communications is basically a waste of time. The medical resources that are going to use amateur radio know what their Hipaa obligations are. And ambulance to hospital, hospital to medical health operational area coordinator. You never need to use any personally identifiable information. It's just medical information about a person of a given sex and age, pre-existing conditions, chief complaint, et cetera. So we waste a lot of time being concerned about HIPAA. And the same is basically true about the issues with regard to encryption. I don't believe the FCC has ever complained or warned anyone that took traffic, amateurs, and this became an issue when the Arden mesh really became viable. And it's not the mesh. Arden is a collection of islands of mesh communications that works at previous generation internet speeds, but it provides facilities that makes everybody comfortable because it's basically the same stuff they have in their office if they're using the internet and Wi-Fi and or a telephone. So there's that. Arden's going to have really long legs. And thanks to our neighboring SEC to the north, he pointed out an article to me yesterday where CAL FIRE, the Forest Service, the National Park Service, in collaboration with DOD, are using, in fact, Arden mesh in conjunction with Starlink for near real-time GIS surveillance of not just heat emitters like fire boundaries and intensity, but also the liveware, personal location stuff, as well as their hardware, their engines and their support stuff. And that's basically going to be the future connector for the mesh, I think, will be tunnels via Starlink, which, you know, how do I say it? Stuff is happening all around us, and being able to recognize it and integrate it with the amateur code and what we can do best, which is we're there and we're talking to each other when nothing else works, organizing the responses to that. So there's just tons of that going on. And shares, WinLink and shares, shared resources is a federal licensing program, and they're more than happy to license any local authority having jurisdiction so that they can participate in the shares HF voice and WinLink communications at packed or they don't have the limitations that Part 97 frequency use has. And I think it's a real safe thing to say that the majority of shares operators are those that local agency are amateur radio operators that local agencies have said, you need to be our shares operators because we don't have people trained in the technology the way you are. And that's happening nationwide too. And that's, oh yeah, in terms of WinLink and encryption, they've gone overboard, and I don't remember if it's a 14-day or 21-day retention, but you can, anybody, any citizen that can access the internet can view real-time WinLink messaging that's going through the central message servers. That doesn't account for the point-to-point or person-to-person stuff, but that just goes back to never in the history of amateur radio's use of TCP/IP has the FCC complained about anyone accepting encrypted traffic and delivering it to the address it's supposed to go to without any risk of man-in-the-middle interference and complete error checking. So I'm done. That's all I had to say. And everybody's saying good stuff. So these meetings are real worthwhile. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Dan. And yeah, I want to back up to what you were saying about encryption, particularly because, you know, I don't think we can assume that the FCC will always have a blind eye turned towards this. And I think it's something we have to tackle proactively. And that may be waking the giant up. I don't know, but we'll talk to the lawyer because Dave Siddall will know what the right tack is. Yeah, go ahead, Dan.
Part 97 is crystal clear. It says amateurs may not obfuscate their messaging. So we're not obfuscating anything. If in an emergency communication situation, agency station A says, you got to get this to agency station B, C, and D as fast as you can, they're just going to hand off a file. And our call signs show up on that. It used to be every 5 seconds going through the Arden mesh. I hope they've reduced that, but out of a surfeit of caution, they wanted it real clear, who was doing what. And that the IP addresses the traffic was coming from and going to, both within and without and outside of the mesh. So, technology, we stumble a lot on technology, only because no one of us can know in depth everything that's coming together that is influencing society in more ways than any of us can conceive of right now. Thank you.
Yeah, well, still, I think that, encryption is everywhere. It's unavoidable. And so we have to deal with this. So sooner or later, it's going to become an issue that we're going to have to deal with on a legal basis, not necessarily on a practical basis. We're already kind of dealing with it. But the legal issue, I think, needs to be addressed.
Part 97 doesn't say anything at all about encryption. It's not in Part 97. What it says is
I am well aware of that.
Okay.
I know exactly what the language is. And,
all right.
And Sadal and I have had conversations about this, so there's no confusion there.
All right.
Okay, K6DLC Dan is next.
Yeah, as far as the encryption stuff, that's the whole thing. Luckily, at the Palo Alto B, we have the ALE, which is encrypted, and that connected to FEMA and all kinds of other hospital things. So the problem is that if your hospital does not have an ALE hardware or something, you might want to talk about who's in charge, get that involved, because that is encryption. That does go to the necessary service like FEMA, your local state agency, etc. They're all connected, so that's an option. And as far as the encryption on WinLink, I don't think it's going to ever happen because it's not a WinLink function. It's the application that runs on WinLink that gets sent through the WinLink protocol. So keep those separate, you guys. You can run a PGP file on WinLink, but you're violating the FCC. So that's PGP is not a WinLink function. It's an application. So that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, thank you, Dan. And that's, further reinforcement of the idea that we need to deal with this and get things straight around it because, people inadvertently do this probably all the time without even knowing it. Something appears unencrypted and when you look at it and then it goes out encrypted. That might be unintentional obscuration, so it might qualify. I don't know. I'm not a lawyer, but we do have lawyers to deal with this kind of stuff. So it's best to seek their counsel. All right, I see Heather up there, AH7RF.
Hey, thank you. So I've heard lots of great comments already on lots of different topics. One thing that was mentioned earlier by you, I think, was the need to get younger hams involved in these things. And I'm not seeing a whole lot of younger hams on this meeting. I think I'm probably one of the youngest, and I'm really not that young. And so I have a few comments about that. First is you have to get more of us younger hams in the Aries leadership positions. Joe AH0A, kind of twisted my arm and got me involved, and it's been a lot of fun. I wasn't expecting that. And then the other thing is if you want to find out what would get younger hams interested, you got to actually talk to them. And I hear a lot of, oh, well, I think they're interested in X, Y, and Z, but I'm not really hearing people interacting a whole lot with us to find out what sort of things get us excited about ham radio. So those are my 2 things, and that's it. Thank you.
All right. Well, thanks for that, Heather. That's really some great comments. And yeah, and let's talk about what younger means too. What we found is that getting really young hams in, and I don't want to ever discourage anybody from doing that, but that's not the demographic that sticks with ham radio. I know this from personal experience. My son was licensed at 11, got his general at 13. He has no interest in ham radio, not a bit. He grew up with it everywhere. Dragging him to ham fests, CW in the car. Maybe that's what turned him off. I don't know. But there are other demographic slices particularly in the lower to mid 30s and sort of mid 40s and up around early retirement that are really interested in ham radio. And Heather, I want to invite you to talk to me and tell me at some point what you find interesting about ham radio. I'd love to hear that. So I'm here to listen. Okay, very good. Let's see, I think we're down to nobody. Is there really nobody else that has a comment here or a question? No. Oh, Tim, W6TSD. You're muted.
Real quick comment. One of the things we've done recently, I mean, we have a more rural county here, and we did get ham radio in all of our rural schools. I think we've got 5 of them equipped in the last few years, and we got them all involved in the shakeout drill, and we're getting a lot of interest out of that. So that's just an FYI. But even in those kids, I mean, I'm a 10-year-old ham that grew up to once Loma Prieta hit, so I think I'm interested in the emergency communication aspect of ham radio. So yeah, there's hope.
Yeah, there's always some. I don't mean to say everyone, but if we look at the general trends, there aren't that many that cross over, and you're one of the rare ones. So good for you.
We actually got a fair number of people in our group that got licensed at a very early age, and just came along later and got involved in more of the adult aspects later in life. So
yep, that certainly happens. People return, but not always. And we don't have good statistics on this, sadly. We don't know how many actually remain active. We pass a lot of people through tests, but we don't track them after that. Let's see, Jim, W1RO.
Yes, this is W1RO, and hopefully you're hearing me well. Early on, you mentioned about the lack of coordination between the hams and the local agencies, and we found in Southern Nevada that's not the case. And it's not the case because we're fortunate a few years ago to have Bill W7HMB out there networking with all the agencies that required support, including the emergency managers from Clark County, which is where Las Vegas is located. And that's basically the heart of getting the agencies to accept us, was that they got to know Bill and that they drafted some agreements. And we actually have over there in Clark County, the MAC has a position with a radio and a headset because the other people within the MAC were complaining about the noise, but they can operate ham radio right out of the MAC. They have an EOC separate room for radio. They also have a 40-foot communications unit. It's a converted RV that used to be a fire department command post. It has a ham radio position in that mobile command post, and it was used during the Trump-Clinton debate. And they've also put the hams to work as checking IDs going into the MAC. So they perform multiple services. Now, I lived over there for 30 years. Now I'm in Nye County, which is 60 miles west. And the hams here have apparently done the same thing. They've gone in and they've done some networking to the point that the emergency manager here in the Pahrump, Nevada area not only maintains all the repeaters for the hams, the local hams, and I'm not talking about just those for emergency communications, but they maintain the repeaters, the IT people for the Pahrump EOC, and the emergency manager takes care of all the equipment, parts, repairs, whatever needs to be done. So it's got to be ground level, bottom up networking that'll actually provide the most for what I believe is the most results in getting the agencies to accept us.
Thanks, Jim. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It's that personal interaction that makes all the difference, and doing it in a professional manner too. I want to stress that to all of you that are out there. If you wander in, looking, kind of like you just got out of bed with the shack on the belt, that's not going to appeal to a lot of people. You got to go in and look professional, let them know you're here to help, and try to take some direction from them. All right, let's see. Next up, Dennis, W6DQ.
Yeah, thank you, Kristen. I want to reiterate what Jim just said for our community here. And we're an isolated community here. This is Ridgecrest, Inyo Kern, Indian Wells Valley, over on the eastern side of the Sierra. We're actually quite isolated from our county seat in Bakersfield, Kern County. We have a group here, and myself, I haven't been here that long, but we meet with our AHJs monthly. But also included in those meetings are every other volunteer organization in our community, as well as community services like the city of Ridgecrest itself. So we meet with our police department, we meet with our hospital, we meet with the Red Cross, the Salvation Army, we meet with, like I say, the fire authority, Kern County Fire. This is a monthly meeting that's held. And so we've got that relationship between our ARRS group and those people. And this has been going on since the 80s. This is not a new thing that just recently occurred. This group has been active since the 80s. And we call it the Emergency Services Committee. And so when we have an emergency, such as the earthquakes we had out here in 2019, everybody knew who to talk to. You know, we knew they knew who to contact. We knew exactly who to contact for what. And it was not just the amateurs, but within the community itself, because of all the agencies and all these volunteer organizations who all connect. CERT's part of that too, I should mention. We all connect together. And I think that is probably one of the most vital things that you can do. And it's been mentioned a couple of times. You reiterated it to what Jim said. And yeah, you have to network, not just with the AHJs, but with other organizations within your community. You know, Red Cross. I know we have at a league level, we have MOUs with Red Cross, but we've had groups that I've been with have had MOUs at the county level with local Red Cross units. And that makes a big difference, being able to interoperate and share information, which is what's vital in an emergency. So
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I just
absolutely
had to add my 2 cents on that one.
No, you're reinforcing a really important point.
It's really, really important.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, Daryl, KI6LDM.
Yeah, hey, thanks, Kristen. And I'm just sort of responding to a comment by Tim in the chat. I think he's spot on about, you know, what is potentially missing. But I will say that Cupertino, and I keep plugging Cupertino and also Santa Clara County. That's why I made the comment about hams in our area, or at least who volunteer for these organizations, whether it's CARES or it's Santa Clara Races, ARRS Races. We serve the served agencies on what they need and how they need it, not how we think we need it or how we think it should be done. And there's MOUs that they've done a good job with. The ECs have done a very good job with that. And also we work closely with our own emergency community, our own emergency management in our own EOC, and as well as what's called a Department Operational Center, or DOC. So the hams simply respond or react to what needs to be done, as opposed to what we think needs to be done. And so to iterate the previous points, yes, it's that networking and that communication and understanding of what needs to be done, how, because these served agencies, they're going to try to do their jobs like they've always been doing their jobs. So we're trying to fulfill that, backfill that, so they can continue to do their jobs the way that they would have normally do their jobs. That's why mesh makes sense. That's why the forms that we use, that they use, we train on those forms. So anyway, I just wanted to reiterate that point, and it's working well. I mean, we always improve, or always can always improve ourselves, but and that's I guess my points I just want to respond to.
All right, thank you, Daryl. Okay, anybody else? All right, well, I think you're all probably either worn out or run out of things to talk about, which is rare for hams, but we've been here about almost 2 hours, not quite, hour and 40 minutes or so. So if there's nothing else, oh, we got one more, Bob A6XE. Bob, you're muted. No, Bob. Let's see. Bob, I know you're talking, but we don't hear anything.
There it is. Got it. Sorry. Rob, getting back to the clean signal thing, Rob Sherwood is presented at Dayton, the Contest University. You can access his talks and lectures. One is he gave in 2019. You can access directly by going to contestuniversity.com. And then the last one is that individual talk is not up. You can access it if you go through the whole proceedings. It's towards the end of the conference. It's like about a 6-hour presentation. But if you kind of use your scroll bar, you can find it. And again, and it's worthwhile taking the time just to find that presentation again, and that's up on YouTube. So you either go to contestuniversity.com or you go up on YouTube and find it there. AA6XA.
Thanks, Bob. And yeah, as I mentioned, Rob is on the committee, so he's providing lots of valuable input. All right, Alan.
Yeah, hi everybody. Listening to a lot of conversation here about served agencies and our relationship with served agencies. And one thing that I hope that we don't lose sight of is the people that the served agencies are serving, and that's the community that's out there. If we're having trouble because served agencies are starting to solve their communications problems and they don't seem to be quite as receptive to us showing up to help them, then maybe we need to broaden our focus a little bit and put it on some of the folks that are out there in the community that could also benefit from our help. And some of you who I know on this chat here, we've spoken before about this. I'm a real big proponent about neighborhood radio programs and really reaching the community itself. And this is one thing that our club has been doing, is to try and get out to the community itself and explain the benefits of radio, not necessarily ham radio, but radio as a general alternative when the cell phones are going to fail. And we're seeing it here in El Dorado County, and we know that this is a problem in California. And this is only going to get worse as we get more and more fires, more and more power shutdowns, and we have a larger population that is depending upon just cell phones for their communications. We're going to have more people that are going to get stranded during disasters. And there's going to be far more people that are going to get stranded during disasters than the served agencies are going to be able to help. So that's where I think we've got some opportunities. And I just want people to start considering how we can maybe direct some of our emergency services support energy towards the populace at large.
Great point, Alan. And I know you give a talk about using radios that are not necessarily ham radios in these contexts. And it's great stuff. Thank you so much for that comment. Yeah, boy, we can't forget the people that we're working for. All right, anything else?
Kristen, this is John. I don't have a hand button on my screen.
That's okay. Go.
Yeah, I've been working on it. I don't know why I don't have one. Just a fast comment to the club presidents. I know that you and I and the other section manager have discussed this a couple of times, but it's important for some funding things and some MOUs and various aspects of amateur radio and working with served agencies, that we have a picture of how many volunteer hours are being expended. And within the Aries Races community, we do have some mechanism for reporting that back. However, probably the biggest chunk of volunteer hours that go out there, be it a parade or supporting a shoulder or whatever like that, doesn't actually come from the Aries organization, but actually from individual clubs. And so I want to tell the club presidents to make sure that you pass information when your particular clubs are doing things of a support to the community, that information gets passed up the line so we can get that into the system. I think we're actually asked about maybe having a formal system for that put in place, so that the tens of thousands of volunteer hours every year that don't get reported makes it into the system, and that the people who are trying to put MOUs and put things in place with the various agencies have that information.
Yeah, for sure, John. Absolutely. Yeah, all that stuff has to be accounted for. And it just will continue to show, even though it's outside of ARRI's, perhaps, the value that we're bringing as amateur radio operators. Dan.
Yeah, uncharacteristically, I gotta thank John for what he just said about involving the amateur radio clubs. And the one change that was made in my opinion, non-functional online monthly reporting system was they de-emphasized hours for everything that's not genuinely crucial. And they are emphasizing comments about who's doing what in that jurisdiction. And I think that's a move in the right direction. I can support wholeheartedly. System itself, I think, due to issues that you've spoken about already, is technologically unfeasible at this point. So I'm stockpiling all of our reports, and we'll do a massive annual report, I suppose, sometime later this month to share. But again, it's just not clear that ARRL can justify everything it's asking for. And if the committee eliminates the make work aspect of it and lets the data owners enter the data directly, it'll be a giant leap forward. So thanks for listening to that.
Yeah, absolutely agree with that. You know, this stuff should be, you know, all of the issues that you deal with, you know, accounting for things, that's friction in the system. And we really need to remove that friction. All right, thank you, Dan. Anybody else? Alan.
Yeah, let me unmute. Yeah, one other comment too that I wanted to make. Somebody else earlier raised this about, you know, getting younger people involved, getting more people to come into the hobby, which, you know, we're all interested in. And I know that Fred Kimmerer, I guess, just recently got added as
New England
ARRI's section director. Is that right? And
he's the New England division director.
Division director. Okay. He's got some really compelling thoughts on how to get younger people involved, and I recommend that anybody who's interested in that talk to him or listen to some of the. I know he's got a podcast on with Eric Guth, QSO Today, and the National Amateur Radio Society he's part of. They're really doing some cutting edge things with getting kids involved, where they really put kids in the focus. Things that might surprise you, like during field day, they give all of the younger amateur radio operators first crack at all of the prime spots during field day. And then after all those spots are filled up, then the rest of the club members can take spots, but they really put the emphasis and the focus on the kids, and they've been pretty successful with that. So you might look him up. That's AB1OC.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he seems like a very interesting guy. I'm looking forward to meeting him in person in January. But I've already been on a few calls with him. Thanks, Alan. Anybody else? Going once, going twice. All right, I think that's it. I really, really appreciate all of you that came, and particularly all of you who participated. This has been a great session. I really, I've taken notes, and I'm going to take them with me in January and explore some of these issues. And I already seen a couple of emails from people out there who've sent me stuff. I'm going to follow up with all of you. So this has been an extremely productive session, and hopefully I'll have some good stuff to report after the January board meeting and let you know what's going on. I'm going to try and get together a division newsletter. I know I haven't done that so far, but I'm really interested in that project. So it's something I want to do so that you guys can know a little bit more about what's going on. All right. Thank you again. And I think we had over 100 participants at some point, which is great. And I'll put the recording up and send a link out to the division email list. Okay. So you all have a great day, a wonderful holiday season, and we'll talk to you after January and let you know what happened.
Thanks, Kristen.
Thanks, Kristen.
Thanks, Kristen.
Thank you, Kristen.
Happy holidays. 7-3, everyone.
Merry Christmas.
7-3,
everybody. 7-3, everyone. Happy holidays.
7-3. Thanks so much, Kristen.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Stay safe out there, everybody.